Hello there, my friends. Salamun alaikum. I hope you are doing well today. It's good to be with you. Have you ever paid attention to the parlance, to the rhythm, to the style of delivery of the various preachers or scholars, whatever you want to call them, in the various religious, denominations or various religions? So I've actually been quite interested and fascinated by the way that preachers in the various religions, how they deliver their message. Now, if you go on the internet, you can quickly see what I'm talking about, but let me summarize what I've noticed. Now, I want to summarize to you 3 or 4 types of delivery styles. Now, let me take them in a group. Let's take the rabbi, the Jewish rabbi delivery style. And now you can look at Rabbi Skoback, I think, from New York. You can look at some other famous rabbis that are on the internet, some celebrity rabbis. And what you will find is that the Jewish rabbi preacher or religious leader will have a very analytical delivery style, but also with a great deal of anecdotes and stories and illustrations. And that is generally how I see their delivery style. And I actually find their delivery style extremely engaging. I see the rabbis as being able to engage the audience with their mix of rational or pseudo-rational arguments mixed with illustrations by means of historical narratives and stories and tales, and also citing historical facts. And that is really the mix, or how they construct their delivery method. Not a great deal of emotion. Those who do practice emotion are generally not so widely famous or acknowledged. Then, in a very similar vein, in fact, I find and this is not to be negative or to degrade the Shia scholars, but I find that they similarly lean on a very rational, logical kind of delivery. So even the tone of the voice would be logical, like I'm speaking here now. It would be, instead of being emotional and passionate and of a driving nature, of an exhortation kind of style. And sometimes I do make videos like that. I do understand. Sometimes my style is exhortational. I'm really saying we cannot and we do, and I'm loading it with that kind of passion. But mostly, I think my videos, I prefer the rational and the logical approach, right? So that is, I believe, the Shia or the Shia scholars, they like, in a similar vein to the rabbis of the Jewish tradition. But then you get the Christian preachers, and those are the charismatic preachers. You see those mass popular, with mass popularity, the ones with the massive churches and with stadiums. And you can find them also, and I've actually been, believe it or not, I've had occasion when I attended a function with a friend at a church. Like my son and I were at this function recently where a good friend of mine graduated as a pastor, as a Christian pastor. And he was a friend of mine, and he said, "Anwar, please come to my graduation." Oh, and I said, "Well, it's an achievement for you. It gives meaning to your life." And we attended this function at the church. And this church was also a regular, fully fledged church, and we went there, massive setup. And it turned out to be a full service, church service, with singing and with scripture reading and with exhortation, powerful preaching. So I've been personally in those environments, and I've also, obviously, you can watch YouTube and you'll see many, many passionate preachers by Christian scholars. So again, here the style is exhortational, it is passionate, it's less logical. In fact, the Christian doesn't expect to be logically wooed or logically sort of driven in church. He expects to be moved emotionally. And if you're a Christian and you disagree, please tell me in the comments why you think so. But generally, and I'm not. Look, there are exceptions. In fact, the monotheistic Christians, or what do they call them, the Christian monotheists. I'm not sure what the church is called. I think their style is slightly different. Right. So, in a similar vein, again, you get the Sunni preachers. And I've been probably in the most preachers' speeches or Friday sermons that I've been to have been Sunni sermons since the time I was just about a little guy growing up, 6, 7 years old. I was in the mosque on a Friday listening to the deeply emotional, moving and heart-wrenching speeches coming from the pulpit. And that is the classic Sunni preaching, is to move you emotionally. And they will use stories, they will use tragedies of the past. Well, everyone likes Shia also heavily leaning on tragedies. But the Sunni will more or less omit logic or logical arguments or rational constructions when they deliver. For them, it is generally a very just a powerful and emotional plea. I've got one here. Maybe we can just take a look at this one, and you can see what I'm talking about.
He said they only wanted Jannah. That's all they wanted. We also want Jannah. You see the difference? They only wanted Jannah. We also want Jannah. See what's happening? You see, a real man is realistic. A real man is realistic. A real man knows and understands that if I'm going to be a rijal, see, to be a man, like I said, it's not a taru. It's not something you get. To be a rijal, these are decisions you have to make. There's sacrifices you have to take. And this is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that you have to live. And a real man and a real rijal understands that if I'm going to be a man...
I think you get the point I'm trying to put across to you, is that there's a heavy leaning on emotionally driving the audience. Now, the question is, what do these different styles reveal? What are we learning from observing what we are observing? Firstly, I want to say that the style is integrally connected to the basic logic or the foundational epistemic, I don't want to use words like that, but the epistemic or the minhaj or the methodology of how each religion is constructed. Now, the Jewish religion prides itself in being constructed in a very robust, logical, and historically accurate and correct manner. And that's why it takes pride in its history, and it takes pride in its logical positions, in the idea of monotheism, and it will often have very strong arguments right there. The Christian religion, however, knows that logic is not its strong point. How the heck do you logically explain the Trinity? And they have tried. They try. All the time they try. But, it's just a simple fact that 3 or 2 objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. And that is a logical problem that the Christian, Trinitarian is dealing with, is that, and I'm not condemning Christianity. I'm not saying, the Qur'an actually condemns the idea of equating anything with God. And that I have to condemn because the Qur'an condemns it. It debunks it. It finds it to be illogical, irrational, and an insult to the glory of Almighty God. So, but the logic in it is also a problem, because 2 objects are occupying the same space at the same time. And that is a logical impossibility. The other thing is, two persons can have one agency. Now, one agency, or the Arabic word is irada, one will. You know, the definition of an individual is irada, is will, is the agency of the individual. You see, if we have two conjoined twins, Siamese conjoined twins, we regard them as legally two persons. Why? Because they have two brains and they have two sets of agency. Even though the one is attached to the other one, they can simply have different ideas, different thoughts, and can agree to differ with the conjoined twin. But if you have somebody that has a conjoined twin, two sets of legs and two sets of torsos without, and I don't know if you even get something like that. But if there's one will, then that is regarded as one person. So it is in the aspect of irada, in the aspect of will, in the aspect of agency that we split, the corporeal number of a person into one or two. So the corporeal number of God is one according to the Christian belief system, yet the agency is sometimes the same and sometimes different. So God can be fully man or fully God, which means that at times God will have the agency that pertains to a man when he was Jesus, when he was crucified, and he lacks or he loses the corporeal or the agentic power of a God, of a divine. But then at another time he could have it. So there's clearly a diffusion or a fragmentation of the will of the agency in the divine. And when agency splits, then the person is no longer one. And so that is the logical challenge that the Christian deals with. And because they have this problem, they don't use logic. They don't use logic because of that problem. And so you come to the Sunni established religion. Let's count it as a different religion because it's so different from the Shi'i tradition in terms of its usul, in terms of its core religious principles. Right? The Shi'i has an extended set of principles which are not found in the Sunni system. So what is the problem? The logic of the Sunni religion is that the hadith books do not always cohere. They don't speak in a coherent way with each other. So you will find a hadith that will contradict another hadith. And that's just a simple fact. The example is the whole polemics between Shia and Sunni. If you have ever seen polemical discussions between Shia and Sunni, there's like Peshawar Nights, which is a detailed polemic between a Shia scholar and a Sunni scholar. Deep, powerful divisions, and both of them cite the same hadith books. So you have deep rifts, and they both come from the same hadith books. In fact, in this classic polemic between Shia and Sunni, which is called Peshawar Nights, on night one, the Shia scholar, in fact, argues that we will not confine our debate to the Qur'an. We will incorporate hadith as the basis to our logical arguments and adumbrations, whatever. So the point here is that because Sunniism is so fraught with contradiction, because the Shias obviously don't buy the Sunni hadiths, and the Shias don't even buy their own hadiths. That's a fact. The Shia, if you've never known this, I'm here to tell you that. The Shia takes a skeptical stance of their own hadith books. The Shia do not have what they call Sahih Kulaini, or Sahih Tusi, or Sahih, whoever Mufid. They don't use that word Sahih for their hadith books. In fact, they have an extremely critical and skeptical stance towards their own hadith. But because the Sunnis regard their hadith as gospel, as a form, as a secondary gospel, as a secondary text or scripture to the Qur'an, and adjunct, a companion text to the Qur'an, a tafsir, words in the margin by which the Qur'an should be understood. Because they've elevated hadith to that level, they then have to stay the course and then reduce the amount of logic, the amount of rational arguments that they built in. In fact, they dislike rational arguments. If you listen to a Salafi or a Wahhabi, they will tell you, if we all use our rational minds and we all have 100 different ideas, and we will be, disrespecting or diminishing the power of rational thought, which the Qur'an in fact lauds. The Qur'an in fact elevates rational thinking, and the Wahhabi and the Salafist Muslim, not so much the Ash'ari, which is the mainstream, but especially the Wahhabi, the Hanbali, the Saudi, that kind of Gulf Arab Muslim, they hate rational thinking. They hate logical thinking. Because if you bring logic in, then they go out the back door. They can't stand the test of rational and logical scrutiny. And I'll give you a simple example. If you read a verse in the Quran that has a figurative meaning, Yad Allah fawqa aydihim, God's hand is above their hands. Now you have to appeal to their higher levels of abstraction. You see, now you no longer can just use the primary school way of thinking, because the Quran uses mutashabihat, right? Which requires slightly more abstraction. But they refuse any form of mental abstraction. Everything they want to take literally, and so they say, no, God has a hand, God has eyes, and then they commit the crime of anthropomorphism, where they transfer their idea of what hands and eyes and feet are onto God, and they create an image of the divine that is completely reduced to the image of an animal or a man or a human image, and so many other things. You see this, I've shown you videos where if you show a typical Sunni Salafi, and they dominate intellectually, although they're not the majority, but intellectually the Salafi Wahhabi are today the strongest intellectual force globally, because they influence all these da'wah guys like Muhammad Hijab and all these American newcomers, Taha, what is his name? Abu Amina Phillips, and all fattened by Saudi money. All of them fattened up by Saudi money, or by just, indirectly Saudi money. Right? And then, of course, the preachers on the pulpits on Friday, they all, not all, in this part of the world, a good number of them are fed and kept alive by the Saudis. So they hate logic, they hate rationality, because the hadith can't stand the test of logic and rational thinking. And that's why they have to scream, and that's why they have to treat you like a child, and that's why they have to...
I can't be anything else with it. It's either a man or something else. Yeah. Where am I going with this?
So you see, then you end up being treated like you're a child that must be screamed at. And there's a powerful verse that the Qur'an offers you. And I like to bring the Qur'an in. There's this verse here. Check this verse out. Chapter 2, verse 171. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa mathalu alladhina kafaru كمثل للذين ينعق بما لا يسمع إلا دعاء ونداء صم بكم عمي فهم لا يعقلون. All the stuff that I just spoke about comes out in here. Listen to this verse. Pay attention and you will see what I'm telling you is absolutely in line. The Quran realizes and speaks to us about this. Those who suppress truth, those who don't like truth, those who want to cover up things, the obscuring ones, whether they're Sunni, whether they're Christian, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Shia, whatever. If a man wants to suppress truth, مثلا kafaru, a person who does kufr is somebody who wants to hide what is right. Those who suppress truth are similar to a bleating sheep. This because they listen only to calling and shouting. Isn't that powerful? They listen only to calling and shouting. That's exactly what I've said to you right now, just now, is that it is to calling and to shouting that they respond. And then the powerful end to the verse is where it actually says their rational faculties are put to sleep, devoid of listening. Because listening doesn't just mean hearing, it means making sense, paying attention. And they don't like that. They don't want to think. Listening is part of thinking. Devoid of articulation, bukmun, umyun. They can't articulate, they can't formulate a rational argument, and devoid of seeing. And this type of seeing here is not the seeing of a man, it is the seeing of insight. They cannot, and in the powerful infahum la yaqilun, they are unable to use or apply their intellect. Now, my friends, that is why the religion of the Sunni and the religion of the Christian can only really thrive, and I'm going to be offensive here and I ask you not to become angry with me, because we are learning here. Tell me in the comments if you have an issue with what I'm going to say right now. You tell me in the comments. You can take it up and don't tell me, Anwar, you're talking nonsense. That's not an argument. You need to explain to me why I'm wrong. My position, my thesis is that the Sunnis will never be able to rebuild a successful country where Islam is, or the Qur'an inspires the culture, the politics, and the entire social ethos of that country. I believe that they will never be able to restore a Quranic society the way that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did in Medina. And I'm not saying, remember, I'm not saying a society that imposes the Quran. I'm saying a society that is inspired by the message of the Quran. Remember, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ ruled Medina, the Muslims were a minority. The Muslims were a minority. The majority of Medina were Jewish people or agnostics or whatever. Or they were just, not interested in religion. And so when I say the Sunnis will never be able to establish a society that is inspired by the principles as contained in the Quran, I say that because such a society will require the voluntary consent of the members of that society, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, whatever. And you cannot get voluntary consent to something that is illogical. You cannot try to convince society that you can marry children of 7 years old when it goes against the very fabric, the very fiber of any human. Is when we all have, not all, but many of us have kids. We have 7-year-old girls. And you couldn't logically or in any rational, moral way contemplate your 7-year-old girl marrying a 50-year-old man. And yet they are trying to impose that type of belief on us. Or killing people for becoming Muslim and then deciding not to be Muslim anymore. These are cruel practices. Or chopping off heads for insulting the king. Or, you see, Sunni religion will never ever, this is sad. I mean, you can hate me for this, but I'm telling you the truth. The Sunnis will never ever reestablish themselves as a force, as a political and social political force in any country. The only way they can do it is by being fascist, by being autocratic, and by having the gun against people's head. That's the only way it's going to happen. And it's really sad for me to say that. But as long as you cling to irrational arguments, irrational beliefs, unnecessarily cruel beliefs, like killing everyone in sight if they don't agree with you, or like acting like, the Arab kings like you see them today. And you will never be able to rule by the consent of the people. Now, the Shia tradition, on the other hand, although I have many differences, and I also feel that they partly share that problem with the Sunni, is they at least have more of a outward or a claimed commitment to logical arguments, although they often seriously falter. You see, there's the Sheikh Sayyid Kamal Haidari. He's a very famous dissident Ayatollah in the Shia world. I think he's based in Iraq or Qom, I'm not sure. But he takes a very contrarian and a very critical stance towards many of the false Shia beliefs. Because the further people go away from what is rational, logical, and coherent, the more emotional they become about the arguments. You see, the more they become like sheep, like this verse says here, the more they turn people into sheep. And I often call them sheeple, right? So the moment you start being treated like a child, like a sheep, like being herded, like being shouted at, by being emotionally abused from the pulpit, whether it's a Shia, whether it's a Sunni, you must know that why is this guy carrying on like this? I heard something once watching a series on TV or something. The guy was saying that if you don't have any logical arguments as a lawyer in court, if you don't have the law on your side, basically just put on a shouting match, and that might convince the judge. And absolutely, you can see today that if you don't have the facts on your side, just go and shout. Just go and emotionally abuse people and just threaten them and tell them you're an anti-Semitic person, or tell them you're a kafir, and you're a Shia, you're a Rafidi, you're a mushrik, you're this. So you basically just go into that mode of emotionally abusing people if you lack rational arguments. So, my friends, these are the 4 ways that I see in the Muslim or in the world today, the Jewish rational approach. But it's also, I did mention the Jews use a pseudo-rational form. You see, they've mastered the art of which not really truly rational, but where it's more like sophistry. Now, there's a form of rational thinking which is bogus. There is a type of rational argumentation which is bogus, and it is called sophistry. Now, sophistry uses tricks of the mind, false and clever, logical, pseudo-logical arguments like appeal to authority, like appeal to the majority, like 2 rights make a wrong or 2 wrongs make a right. So all these false logics, 2 rights make a wrong, appeal to authority, appeal to the majority, using a argument out of place, like misinterpreting words. Those are all the tools and the skills of the sophist, of the person who uses sophistry. And so the Jewish scholar can stand there and sound rational and logical, but his art is not so much logic and rational thinking. His art is using sophistry against you. And if you want to look at the Hasbara, the Israeli Zionist propaganda methodologies, it's completely abusing facts. It's spinning a lie using 5 facts and 5 lies. You see, it's building a grand lie by using 5 facts and 5 lies, or half-truths. And that is I just wanted to add that to the so-called Jewish rabbis' way of going and giving a very logical way. But it does become actually more convincing for me than the screaming of the Sunni and the screaming of the evangelist. And I find the Shia scholars actually being quite convincing also, with the exception of when they actually try to weave in emotion also to defend obviously silly arguments. And there are silly arguments in the Shia faith, unfortunately. And most of those silly arguments were invented in the 1500s when the sultans of Iran decided to make the Shia a second Islamic religion or second Islamic madhab, instead of retaining it as the authentic original voice of Islam. But they wanted to now bring it up to par as a parallel religion or mazhab to Sunnism. If Shiism was never a parallel mazhab. Shiism was always projected itself as the authentic, original, unadulterated, uncontaminated voice of Islam, reaching to the Qur'an as its core epistemic source, and being skeptical of hadith generally. And as a secondary source to the Qur'an, there were those men and women who demonstrated the spirit of the Qur'an in their own lives. So the idea of the Imam, of somebody who instills in himself or in herself the ethos of the Qur'an. In other words, the ethos of justice, the ethos of compassion, the ethos of courage and valor, the ethos of spiritual or proximity to Allah, qurba, closeness to Allah, asceticism in a way. But Islamic asceticism is not something that is aloof. Islamic asceticism or Quranic asceticism is a spiritual position that is held in our daily lives. Now, the original Shia would look at the qualities of people and then make that a secondary source to the Qur'an. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the Qur'an is the primary source, and those who embody the Qur'an, those who embody every aspect, every preaching, every teaching, every principle of the Qur'an are regarded as the people of leadership, with leadership qualities. That's exactly how the Houthis of Yemen maintains their Islamic ethos, and why I say that if there is to become a society infused and inspired by the Quran, it will be the people who are currently fighting Israel, the Yemeni, Ansarullah, Hezbollah, the Hamas guys, because these guys have all come down, cut through all the nonsense, and they are basically looking at the Quran as a clean and pure source of inspiration. My friends, I just wanted to share those with you. I want to make another video actually about logical methods and methodologies, but I'll do that in maybe a part 2. Thank you for your attention. Keep well. Assalamu alaikum.